Hi brothers and sisters, back for another video. This is a bit of an unusual topic, and yet when we reason the simple truths out of what we're being shown, it is there. It is validated by the facts of our own reality. And so we're going to take a look at, it's called Omicron. Draconis is what it is. And it's found in the constellation of Draco. Alright? So we're going to take a look at this little planet. We're going to call it a planet for now, till we get into the study. And its name is Omicron Draconis. Okay? And this is what it says. Well, okay, we'll read a few details on it. This is what it says of the Omicron Draconis. It is a giant star, in fact. And Omicron Draconis is not part of the Draco constellation outline, but it is within the borders of the constellation. Also this little fact. Based on the spectral type of the star that it is called, and I won't tell you what it is, but I will put this link below. It says the Omicron Draconis color is orange to red in color. So that's utterly fascinating, okay? So let's just bear these few details in mind concerning this giant star called Omicron Draconis is its name. Now let's read, because this is why we're going to read or try to understand what Omicron Draconis may be all about. Now understand, it's caught in the atmosphere of Draco, the constellation Draco, which currently, from my understanding, Earth is said to be passing through it. So, we'll go to Isaiah 54:12, and we're going to read what it says about what our new sun is going to look like. And this is what it says. It says, I will make your battlements of rubies, your gates of sparkling jewels, and all your walls of precious stones. Now, for anybody who's watched my other videos, you know where we're heading on this one. If you look the word battlement up, or pinnacles as is translated in the other translations, it's going to be your Strong's Hebrew 8121, and it says sun, S-U-N. It also is your battlements. So what's a battlement? It kind of has the idea of a defense, doesn't it? Daylight, east side sun, sundown, sunrise, sunset, west. Alright? And so God says in Isaiah 54:12, we just read it, didn't we? I will make your battlements of rubies, red, your gates of sparkling jewels, and all your walls of precious stones. Right? So, why is this planet that's technically not part of the Draco system, but rather seems to be caught in its outer atmosphere? And if you go to Wikipedia on the Draco constellation, it'll show you actually Omicron Draconis quite a ways off from the actual constellation of Draco. And the Omicron Draconis is kind of caught in its atmosphere, which is very interesting. Because when we understand the definition gave in our Strong's Hebrew of the Leviathan, this is what it says. Alright? So it is Strong's Hebrew 3882 is our number. It means serpent, dragon, Leviathan. It says a sea monster, a crocodile, a dragon producing eclipses. So it's producing eclipses. So if we understand from what we've learned on the Shulamite, she says, look not upon me because I am black, because the sun has looked upon me. She's saying the false light. That's not our real sun. Has looked upon me. My mother's sons were angry with me. They made me the keeper of the vineyard. But my own vineyard have I not kept. So she's indicating to us, and there's more to that, right? When we go in and get looking at it, and we did that in another video where she says, my skin grows dark, black upon me and begins to peel. I burn and my skin peels. And she says, they no longer regard me in the assembly as a voice worth listening to. So we see her being cast down is what we see. And we've studied all this. So this, we'll go in and we'll read this verse as well. Job 26:7 to understand our thoughts as we go along here. So that was the last passage I pulled up. So it is Job 26 verse 7. It says he. Nope, I'm putting she. She spreads out the northern skies. That's interesting. North. Or she stretches out the north over the empty place. Pay attention there. North. We want to write down the word north. And we want to write down the empty place. Right? So we'll go to the King James. She stretches out the north over the empty place, and hangeth the earth upon what? Nothing. Nothing. You know the nothing earth is hanging on right now? That false sun up there in the sky. That same false light that turned the Shulamite black and caused her skin to burn upon her and go dark. And it's akin to the false light of Lucifer shining. It's also akin to the Lord, our true Lord, attaching the earth upon nothing. We are hanging on nothing. Nothing that can save this earth. That's what we're hanging on right now. And the north has been spread over empty space. What met in the north? Well, we know it was the congregation of the Lord that met in the north. That's identified in Isaiah 14, and we also know it was Lebanon. We've studied what they did to the house in the forest of Lebanon where the government of God met, which was on the north mountain. And it was called the congregation of the Lord. Excuse me. That met in the north. Well, that was the house in the forest of Lebanon. We've looked at this, we've studied it, we know it to be true. And it's identified as a congregation of women that the men did not want. It was like a bitter grape on the father's tongue to have to receive the word of God, the law of heaven, at the wife, at the mouth of the women. It just, they couldn't stand that. They couldn't take it. So we're looking at all this allegory and we're pulling it all together. Now, this little Omicron Draconis in the constellation of Draco would be really called, if we understand the meaning of Omicron, I picture it to be little. I should have did a little bit more in depth on it. But it's the little dragon. That's what this little planet or large giant star would be called, the little dragon. Even though it's not part of Draco, it got caught in its atmosphere. So you know what I began to reason out? It's the rod of iron. That's what she becomes for being rejected by the men of Israel for a harlot spirit that would exalt man as God and rejected her light. So what we see now, we're hanging on nothing. We're hanging on a false light. We're attached to nothing, right? Earth is literally attached to nothing. There's no gravity coming off of that false sun. We're not attached to it. We're not. It's a false light. It's not a real sun, S-U-N. It's a fake sun. And that eclipsing dragon, for these different channels that will tell you, it's literally eclipsing our real sun, is what it's doing. And I'm going to tell you that our real sun is possibly Omicron Draconis, which has become, or will become, what's considered the rod of iron. Now we've studied that term, the rod of iron, and we've connected it to wisdom, which we find her speaking in Proverbs 1 to her children. And she says, when I called, you didn't answer. And now I'm going to laugh at you in the day of your calamity for not hearkening to me and to my words of wisdom. Reasoning. And she says, you fools who loves foolishness, things that don't even add up, you fools. She says, I'm going to laugh at you in the day of your calamity. And that leads you to Psalm 2, to the rod of iron, where she's mocking the children. And I'm going to tell you that that's this rod of iron, possibly this little dragon, that is our real sun, our real battlement made. It says it goes from the color red, orange to red. Orange typically represents wisdom. Red, the Lord. So in her wrath. And we've talked about the Lord, the three lords, sitting on three thrones, separate, distinct thrones, in Psalm 110. And we identified the Lord that strikes through kings in the day of her wrath because they rejected the spirit of her covenant and said, let us cut her bands asunder. Bands is simply another term for her law system. And so when it comes to the north being an empty place, we saw what King Solomon and kings like him did to this government of God that met in the house of the forest of Lebanon, which was called the Congregation of the North. That's right. And it all has to do with Lebanon. So, in the end, she stretches the north over empty space. There's really nothing to tell anybody that she was, in fact, there, except the holy ones reaching out and telling us she was there and she's coming to be there again. She's going to be our battlement of a ruby sun is what she's going to be. She's going to be in battle on our behalf. She's mad. She's mad at what that Draco has done to our law system, and she's mad at us for not hearkening to the spirit of her when she called to us. And she has every right to be angry at the children for rejecting her and her law. And you could say, no, she doesn't. Oh, yes, she does. Oh, yes, she does. Just open your eyes to what's going on in this world. We're good little children, you think? If we were good little children, we would not be in the friggin' mess that we are in. And so we get the connection of wisdom being greatly angered. All right, by Leviathan and also by her very own children who won't hearken to the spirit of her covenant when she calls with words of wisdom. So, in effect, a little bit of that dragon has rubbed off on her. And she says, fine, you must like it. But I'm also going to tell you, it's akin to the presence of God. And what it's going to look like, the presence arrives, the true light comes in contention. So if you're picturing the false light up there, the false sun up there, when our real sun finally comes and beats the dragon, it says the dragon flees. You see the dragon fleeing in Isaiah 27. When she begins to water her garden with the true water of her law system, of heaven's law system, you see the serpent fleeing. And that's in effect your allegorical understanding of what's going on with the Draco system and Earth passing through it. And while it's described as an eclipsing dragon, eclipsing possibly our real sun known as Omicron Draconis now, because this is our little light beginning to shine in, right? The truth is beginning to shine upon us. But when she comes in to this system, then it becomes known as the presence of God's arrival. And when it arrives, she comes into contention like Michael. She who is like God is how that translates. That's right, me. Me is feminine. Who is like God? That's a feminine. Who is like God? Michael. That's akin to the battlement of the daughters of Israel, also angered in wrath for the rejection of her covenant. And when she arrives into our system, the presence of God is what it's known. She comes in a contention against that false light, and she stands up for her children, though angry. And there is a time on earth that is seen that we have never seen the likes of. And that's going to line up with this huge sun, new sun, or our original sun, that got eclipsed by Draco, the constellation, come between Earth and our real light. And then there becomes this false light put in play, that Earth is really just hanging on nothing. It's hanging on empty doctrine, really. It's not going to save Earth. A false light can't save us. We're going to die under a false light. We need our real light. And so Omicron, Draconis, the little dragon, is referenced as, I believe, as the little dragon because she is saw as the rod of iron. And because of all the effects that this new sun's arrival is actually going to have on planet Earth, which is going to be like great tribulations like we've never seen before. And so you get identification of what that's going to look like to some degree, and we've discussed this again also on another video. And this was the identification of what it's going to look like. So Isaiah 64 verse 1, "Oh, that thou wouldest rend the heavens, that thou wouldest come down, that the mountains might flow down at thy presence." What's that? That's the volcano. That's a volcano eruption. When you've got a large body coming into our system, coming up to Earth, it's going to start to pull, right? And so we're seeing great volcanic eruptions going on around the globe. I forget how many they claim is erupting right now. We're seeing it shake. We're seeing the plates being pulled and pushed together apart. And for those who says, well, if you live around the coastline, you better get away from the coastline, you forget God's in charge of what land gets pushed up and what land gets shoved down. So you may be living in the middle of a continent, but if God decides to shove part of that down by breaking up the plates and other parts, you don't know what that's going to look like. The coastlines may end up getting shoved up into the air, and you yourselves who are further inland shoved down. You just don't really know what the effects of this huge planet, this giant star coming into our system, which is going to be then what the earth actually gets hung upon. The truth, our real battlement. And we were told in, I forget the chapter, Jeremiah, 4, 6, 7, 8, that daughter Israel was the battlement. Yeah. She was the stronghold that we were to cling to for protection. And so we get all of these allegories answered for us through this system, I believe, the little dragon, which is also going to be your rod of iron, your daughter of Israel when she's caught up. It is not a son caught up to the throne to rule. It is the daughter of Israel. The dominion was promised to be restored back to her. This was always her rightful place. Isaiah 49 says Israel is the light of the world. It does not say a man is your light. He pointed to her. Joshua in the Old Testament, I believe, pointed to her. He knew her. He was a brand plucked from the burning, just as this daughter also is, that will be caught up. And I believe she's actually going to rule from her throne, which may well be the little dragon, Omicron, Draconis, with the light coming in. But we're going to see great upheaval on earth, because we're going to have this false light shining here, and then we're going to have another one come in. And it's going to have it's going to cause great upheaval. And it's going to be like the tribulation. That battle of Michael, she who's like God, Israel battling as your battlement of Ruby. Yes. So again, we'll look at Isaiah 64. I didn't finish reading. So we got the volcanic eruption going on. Verse 2, "As when the melting fire burneth, the fire causes the waters to boil, to make thy name known to thine adversaries," those who heckle won't listen to wisdom, to sense and reasoning. They're so caught up in their own arrogance that they just don't want to hear truth and reason. And study, that's the furthest thing from their minds. They just, all they're hanging on to is a religious lie. That's all they're hanging on to. You're attached to nothing. You're attached to empty space, right? That's what the earth is hanging on. It's hanging on nothing. The north is attached to empty space. But we also understood how Solomon targeted the house in the forest of Lebanon. And we studied all that. So we'll continue reading here. It says, as when the melting fire burneth, the fire causes the waters to boil, to make thy name known to thine adversaries, that the nations may tremble at thy presence. So we're looking at the presence of God, which was called the camp of Mahanaim, all right? And we see her, again, the Shulamite, with this double army, the 144,000, and they are identified as daughters. We've looked at this. So, verse 3 of Isaiah 64, when thou didst terrible things, which we looked not for, thou camest down, the mountains flowed down at thy presence of volcanoes. For since the beginning of the world, you see what it's saying here? Since the beginning, when she was there, the true light of the world was there, before man cast her down and chose to hang us on nothing, a religious lie, so he could rule and play God and yoke woman under him. And she's got no wrath because there's no such thing as a female God. You aren't really listening to wisdom, are you? You're not really reasoning the truth out, are you? You just want to play limbo and get under as low as you can and say, see, we're innocent. Are you? Are you really? Have you took a real good look around this globe at our history, what it has done, where we really should be if we were truly listening to God and truly children of God? Where would we really be right now? We wouldn't be here in this mess, I can tell you that. So for since the beginning of the world, you have not heard nor perceived by the ear, neither has the eye seen, O God, beside thee, what she has prepared for those that waiteth for her. And there's a very few of us waiting. Very few of us waiting for her to show the truth. She says, I'm going to scroll back the heavens and I'm going to show you the truth. That's right. So I wanted to look at another word here right quick. Because that dragon, that word dragon, I believe it's Greek. Do I still have it here? I may not have it pulled up here. Let me see. No, I don't. I should have had that pulled up. Sorry. Yeah. So we know about the eclipsing dragon, but this is important to understand. I think all the terminology around it. Excuse me. Draken, 1404, a mythical monster, a dragon or huge serpent. This is what's so interesting about it. It's from the English term dragon, properly a seeing one, used of mythical dragons, huge serpents, seeing their prey from far away. Figuratively, they say it's used of Satan. I'm still looking a bit deeper into that because God says, I made the Leviathan alongside of the behemoth. Behemoth is just simply a description of the nation of Israel when she's moving in the manner that she ought to be moving in. So we're going to have that behemoth coming back into existence, and it's going to be battling the dragon. But if God made the dragon, then there's a purpose for making the dragon. And the purpose of the dragon is to make her strong and make her build an army that none can approach to. The purpose is of making, in some manners, a little dragon. Because there comes a point in her rule, because of their rejection of her and her law, that she actually does have to rule with a rod of iron. Now, mother's love, we know. mother's allowed to be angry when we screw up. They are. They're allowed to try to teach us right from wrong. And that is certainly what their purpose ought to be, is to teach us right from wrong. But if you think our Creator Mother isn't entitled to her wrath for what we did to her law, to her daughters, to one another as sisters, and what the men have done to us and what we have permitted them to do to our children, then I don't know where you're looking. You've got to have the eyes of a dragon, you do, to see into the truth deep enough, like wisdom is trying to teach us to see. So, seeing one, used of a mythical dragon, huge serpents, seeing their prey from far away. Exercising subtle or indirect impact on heathen government powers. So we come back to what the dragon, in a sense, did to the true daughters of Israel, which began through, we know, men like Solomon, we've studied this, and others. It began with Nimrod, the building up of Babylon, a harlot that would bow to a man as God. Like the king in the book of Esther, who decreed a law when his wife wouldn't play a harlot for him. And he got all mad and egotistical and said, well, I'm king. Well, guess what? She's a queen in her own right. She's not a queen because he made her a queen. She's a queen because she's a queen. End of story. But all we have in this world, all we hear is king, 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 and male, 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 and son, father, and that's it. And you think mother, somehow in that brain that lacks wisdom, because you won't listen to her, you believe it's just father and son and another male, and that there's no such thing as a mother that gave life to you. And that she's not entitled to wrath because of what you did. Wow. But it all reasons out. It all reasons out. So the Lord hangs the earth on nothing. That's religious lies. So the house in the forest of Lebanon congregation. I thought I wrote something else here. I didn't. But in a sense, she's developed some dragon-like qualities, which again may go to the north kingdom, which is where your daughter comes from, Ephraim. She sits between the cherubim, is what she does. She's your glory, sitting on the throne. I had other things pulled up, and we might eventually go into more detail on it. But she sits between the cherubim as the glory, and she comes from the north, and sometimes the emblem of the north is a red lion that sort of looks like a dragon. So when she comes back into our system to take back her birthright and what rightfully belongs to her, she comes back as Omicron Draconis, but she is the true light of the world. Ooh, somebody don't want you knowing that. Yeah. Somebody wants to keep telling you and feeding you lies. Okay, I'm just running through. See what I did miss. So she becomes our Michael that's going to stand up for us and actually battle against the false light. And so it appears that for a time we're actually going to have the false sun and the real sun, and we're going to be able to actually behold it. When God says, I will scroll back the heavens, you're actually going to see it. You're going to bear witness to this truth. So I will make your battlements, your sun, S-U-N, of rubies, your gates of sparkling jewels, and all your walls of precious stones. So of course there's a lot more to be understood, but boy, it's getting really fascinating with this particular word, Omicron, and then Omicron Draconis. Say that fast 3 times. But like I said, we looked at the rod of iron. We studied it in Revelations 12. You piece it with Proverbs 1, Psalm 2, and if you've got the Apocrypha and you're not offended by studying, you can go study Wisdom, chapter 3. We've looked at that. And Isaiah 64 describes what the presence is going to look like coming back into our system. She was there at the beginning of time, rejected by the first Adam, so he could play God. They could write their own laws. They could yoke her. They could steal her good. They could drip blood into her law system, which is now why women bleed in travail in childbirth, because of the blood that got written into our law. And there's so many other aspects of this that begins to really flesh itself. But we're going to start to see our real sun very soon. And I think it is Omicron. I can't say it. Omicron Draconis. Yeah, our little dragon. And but she was our original light in the beginning. And we see what those signs looks like when the presence does appear in Isaiah 64. So I think I've got it all. So I just found that fascinating. Hopefully they won't strike my video for speaking on the constellation of Draconis. And like I said, I'll leave this link down below. And I'll also leave the Draco. Not that anybody can't do it, but I'll leave the link for Draco, the constellation, from Wikipedia. But again, it says Omicron Draconis is a giant star. Omicron Draconis is not part of the Draco constellation outline, but is within the borders of the constellation. So there does appear that she got caught into that pull, right? That the planets are known to have with each other. And based on the spectral type of the star that it is, the Omicron Draconis color is orange to red. Now, orange is often saw as wisdom, and red would be seen as a wrath. But we're also looking at the outer colors of the rainbow, and we're told that God's covenant is a sevenfold spirit, which is identified as these 7 colors of the rainbow. So it's very interesting. It says the star can be seen with the naked eye. That is, you don't need a telescope or binoculars to see it. Omicron Draconis is a binary or multiple star system, and that may well be so. Because we are looking at a Lord that had great power. We are. And she still does. She still does. But lessons has to be taught. When the children go astray, then lessons get taught, lessons get learned, you know. And so, there we go. So, let me just pull up my video here. Let me see if it's showing that it's still running. Yeah, good. Thanks for watching the video. I hope it doesn't get striked because I'm looking at the constellation of Draco and the constellation, or this planet, that's in its atmosphere, perhaps got caught in its atmosphere, by its atmosphere, and the eclipsing dragon, Draco, that eclipses our real sun. And then the fleeing dragon in Isaiah 27. It's really fascinating to put this stuff together. And it just fits with the rod of iron, because a dragon is known to be quite, it can be quite fierce, angry, it can be quite wrathful. And so anger has built up, and she's become known as Omicron Draconis, the little dragon, which is also, I believe, akin to your rod of iron. So, there we go. Thanks for watching. I pray the Lord blesses you with an abundance of truth. And I guess that's everything. Thanks for watching.